So, you want to own Barone Sanitation. Start with a real number, from a real city. When prosecutors finally broke the waste-hauling cartel that ran New York in the mid-90s, collection prices fell by between 30 and 40%. Not because the trucks got cheaper, not because the landfills moved closer, because the thing holding those prices up had never been a cost in the first place. Businesses in that one city were estimated to have been overpaying by roughly $600 million a year for garbage collection. That premium is the entire business you are about to buy, and almost nobody watching this story ever notices it, because everyone is looking at the club. So let us price what is actually on the books.
Start with what the world sees, because the front is deliberately loud. A strip club off a New Jersey highway with a back office, a social club behind a butcher's shop, a crew running the recognizable trades, hijacked cargo, sports betting, card games, protection, loans at brutal weekly rates. It looks like a portfolio of crimes, and every one of them is loud, illegal, and photogenic. And then, quietly, on the tax return, there is a job title at a garbage company, waste management consultant. Everyone treats that line as the joke, the fig leaf, the excuse for the accountant. It is not the joke, it is the business. Everything else on that list is a way of making money. This one is a way of owning a market.
So price the loud crimes first, and watch how bad they actually are. A hijacked truckload is a single event. You steal it once, you fence it at a fraction of value, and every man in the chain takes a cut. Loan sharking looks extraordinary on paper. Weekly interest of a few percent annualizes into triple digits. But the borrower is, by definition, somebody no bank would lend to, so defaults are constant, and collection is done by hand, which costs time, exposure, and occasionally a prison sentence. Card games and betting are cash-rich and completely non-recurring. Every one of these earns in spikes, carries legal risk on each transaction, and cannot be forecast a month ahead. That is not an enterprise. That is a series of incidents. Now look at the one nobody puts on a poster. Every restaurant, shop, office, and apartment block in the territory produces waste every single day. Removing it is not optional. It is a legal requirement, enforced by health inspectors, and a business that stops paying is a business that closes. The customer cannot defer it, cannot do it themselves at scale, and cannot go without it for a week, and they pay for it monthly, on a contract, forever. Nothing is stolen, nothing is smuggled, nothing needs fencing. An invoice goes out, and money arrives. Every month from thousands of customers, whether the economy is good or terrible. Recessions do not stop rubbish. If anything, the only thing that reduces the volume is the customer going out of business entirely.
And this is a genuinely excellent industry, entirely legally. Real waste companies run operating margins in the region of 25 to 30%, which is better than most manufacturing, and better than nearly all retail. The revenue is contracted and recurring, which is why investors value these companies at high multiples of earnings. The barriers are heavy: trucks, depots, licenses, and above all, access to a landfill or transfer station, which is the real choke point in the whole chain. And it is a density business. 20 trucks running 300 stops a day is 6,000 collections. Pack those stops onto the same streets and your cost per pickup collapses. Spread them across a city and it doubles.
Which points to the one weakness in an otherwise beautiful business, because density only works if you actually own the street. If 3 haulers serve the same block, all 3 send a truck down it,
All three carry the cost of the whole route, and all three end up competing on price to fill it. That is ordinary competition, and in a service with almost no product differentiation, it does exactly what you would expect. It grinds margins toward nothing. Ordinary waste companies fight this with acquisitions, buying rivals street by street for decades. It is slow, expensive, and requires enormous capital. There is a faster method. It costs almost nothing, and it is the actual product on this ledger. The cartel that ran this industry called it property rights. Not ownership of trucks or depots, ownership of customers. Each business belonged permanently to one hauler. A restaurant could not shop around because no rival would quote it. If one did, the association corrected it. And the right to a customer was itself an asset, bought, sold, and inherited between operators like a lease, which converts an ordinary competitive service into something far more valuable, a subscription that cannot be cancelled. Real haulers lose 8 to 12% of customers a year. At 10%, a decade turns over your entire book. Here, churn was zero. Not low, not managed, structurally impossible, because leaving required a competitor willing to take the call. And once nobody can leave, price stops being a market outcome and becomes a decision. You are no longer quoting against a rival, you are quoting against the customer's alternative, and the customer has none. Which is precisely why prices dropped by 1/3 the moment the arrangement was dismantled. That gap between what the service cost to deliver and what the customer was made to pay is not profit in the ordinary sense. It is a private tax on every business, collected monthly with a legal invoice attached. And it appears on the books as completely legitimate revenue from a completely legitimate company. No fence, no laundering, no risk in the transaction itself. And this changes what the company actually owns. Not the trucks. Trucks depreciate, break, and can be replaced by anyone with credit. Not the depot, not the containers, not the men. What it owns is a map, a list of streets and the businesses on them, each one permanently assigned. That book of customers is the asset, and it was treated exactly like one, valued, traded between operators, used as collateral, and handed down inside families as inheritance. Which is why a hauler with old trucks and a good territory was worth far more than a hauler with new trucks and a scattered one. The equipment was never the company. The map was the company.
So put the ugly part where it actually belongs on the ledger. Threats, arson, sabotaged trucks, the occasional body, none of it earns a single dollar. Not one of those acts generates revenue. They exist for one purpose, to make the property rights system credible without a court to enforce it. That makes violence an enforcement expense, sitting in the same column as legal fees, security, and insurance in a lawful firm. And like any enforcement cost, it is only worth paying while it is cheaper than the alternative. The moment prosecutors raise that price, with surveillance, informants, and long sentences, the arithmetic inverts, and the whole structure becomes loss-making. Which is exactly what happened.
And the method that ended it is worth reading closely, because it was not really a police operation. New York created a regulator for the carting industry, with the power to license every hauler operating in the city. No license, no trucks on the street. Applicants were background checked, and anyone tied to the association simply did not receive one. At the same time, the regulator capped the rate that could be charged per unit of waste, which removed the premium directly rather than arguing about it in court. Notice what that attacks. Not the violence, not the men, not even the crimes. It attacked the property rights system, and the moment customers were legally free to switch, the entire valuation of the business collapsed with them.
Which leaves the obvious question. If the garbage is the business, why keep the club at all?
because a cartel premium arrives as clean, invoiced, taxable income, and the loud crimes do not. Hijacking and gambling generate cash that cannot be banked, explained, or spent in daylight. A cash-intensive venue solves that. Takings that nobody can precisely count, sitting next to takings that nobody can precisely trace. The club is not a profit center. It is infrastructure. It is the plumbing that connects the dirty side of the operation to the clean one, and it is priced accordingly. Cheap to run, tolerable margins, enormous strategic value. Everybody films the club. Nobody films the invoice.
Then the costs that never reach a spreadsheet. A payroll of people who must be paid whether or not there is work, because an idle earner is a dangerous one. Tribute flowing upward permanently as a fixed percentage that no performance can reduce. Legal defense, which is continuous rather than occasional, and the most reliable expense in the entire operation. Prison, which removes senior staff at random intervals with no notice and no replacement plan. And the deepest cost of all, every single person in the structure is also a potential witness. A lawful company that loses an executive loses a manager. This one loses a manager and gains a prosecutor's file.
So close the book. On one side, a recurring, legally mandated, contracted service with 25 to 30% operating margins, zero customer churn, and a price premium of 30 to 40% that the customer cannot escape. That is, on paper, one of the finest business models anybody has ever constructed. On the other, an enforcement arm that generates no revenue, a permanent legal budget, a workforce that cannot be fired but can be flipped, and a structure that only holds while the state is either uninterested or outmatched. And that is the flaw that ends it. The premium was never earned. It was rented from the absence of enforcement, and rent gets called in.
Convert it, and the shape is uncomfortably familiar. Strip out the crimes, and what is left is a waste-hauling firm with a territorial monopoly and a captive customer base, which is to say, a utility. Utilities are among the most valuable businesses in existence precisely because customers cannot leave and demand does not fall. The difference is that a real utility is granted its monopoly by a government in exchange for a regulator setting the price. This one took the monopoly without asking, and therefore without the price cap. So should you buy Barone Sanitation? The garbage business, yes. Everything attached to it, no. Because the lesson underneath this company is that the most profitable crime was never theft. It was quietly turning a competitive market into a bill that nobody is allowed to stop paying.